Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Angela Catalessa, and I'd like to welcome you to our symposium today. I'm here with Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman and Dr. Zorana Ichevich-Pringle. I'm very honored to be here for this panel today. And oops, let me move this over a little bit real quick. A little bit about who we are. I have my doctorate in human and organizational learning from George Washington University, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation on polymaths. And the title of it is there on the screen in case you would like to Google it and read it or scan it. Next, a little bit about Scott. He's got a PhD in cognitive psychology from Yale. He's the author of many books, but a few of the more recent ones, which are very pertinent to discussions around polymathy, include his book called Transcend, The New Science of Self-Actualization, and also Wired to Create, Unraveling the Mysteries of the Creative Mind. And he's also a host of the Psychology Podcast. Scott, is there anything else I should add about your background or that you'd like to add?
No, it's fine.
All right, and Zorana, she has a PhD in personality and social psychology from the University of New Hampshire. She's a senior research scientist at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She's published a bunch of articles, including Predicting Creativity, Interactive Effects of Openness to Experience and Emotion Regulation Ability, as well as Creative Polymathy, What Benjamin Franklin Can Teach a Kindergartner. She's the associate editor of Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts, as well as the International Journal of Creativity and Problem Solving. And Zorana, is there anything you'd like to add?
That sounds great. Thank you, Angela.
All right, moving right along. So you may be wondering, well, what is a polymath? Tell me why I'm here watching this video. Well, poly, as you probably know, means many, and math, this is not about mathematics at all. This math is short for manthinin in Greek, which means learnings or to learn. So someone who's a polymath at a high level is just someone with many learnings. They're a person of wide-ranging knowledge and experiences. Sometimes they're called Renaissance persons. Basically, it means that they have expertise across multiple disciplines and they're not a narrow specialist. There's no agreed upon definition of what makes a polymath, or specific requirements that someone has to meet to be able to affix that label to their identity. But Robert Root Bernstein and his wife, Michelle, who I think is kind of the forefather, Robert is kind of the forefather of polymathy studies, has proposed a working definition, which is the active engagement in multiple interests or endeavors, integrating vocations with avocations, which are work and hobbies, simultaneously or serially across the lifespan. So that's his definition, and I think it's a pretty good start. Another thing I want to point out before we dive in as well is that polymathy, it's not like you are one or you're not. Polymathy exists on a spectrum. There's a range of how polymathic an individual can be. In fact, Peter Burke, who's also one of the leading scholars on polymathy out of Cambridge, has proposed that there's 4 types of polymaths. Passive polymaths, they're people who read widely, but make their reputation in one discipline alone. Limited polymaths, who are active in a small cluster of neighboring disciplines. The serial polymath, whose interests gradually shift from one discipline to another, and then what he calls the proper polymath, and that's someone who continues to work in several fields and make serious contributions to all of them. And a little bit more too about why I chose to study this and write a doctoral dissertation on it is just in me, what's in me, what has always been in me is this question of like, how can I live a good life? Like, what question could be more important for each human being to answer for themselves than I'm here in this life and how am I going to live it well? And what came up for me is, living well to me means that I have the full human experience, that I'm living broadly and really soaking in the fullness of life. It means that I'm trying lots of things and being open to experiences, seeing as much of literally the planet as I can, traveling, being exposed to other cultures, meeting and learning from many different types of people, just learning in general, making a positive impact while I'm here. And when I'm faced with problems, as we all will be, just doing my best to be creative in how I solve them, being brave, you know, reaching towards my fullest potential, being my full self, being authentic, and living life without regrets. So for me, those are the things that I think help someone live a good life. And when I take all of that together, basically what that means is you live life in a polymathic way. So that is why I chose to study this population. And a little bit about my study, the Cliff Notes version, just real quick. Oops, let me go back. So I did a phenomenological study, a qualitative study, basically interviewing polymaths. The basic part, without going into too much detail, the basic requirements to participate was that this person had to be an expert and quite accomplished in both the arts and the sciences, and they had to self-identify as being a polymathic person. The major research questions were, what is the lived experience of polymaths and how did they come to be that way? In terms of my findings, here's just, again, a real gloss over to keep this brief, but in terms of their development, an interesting finding was that financial resources and family can both hinder or promote polymathy. And both of these, by the way, had some real split, interesting, I'm not saying this well, let me back up. You could have little financial resources or a lot and still become a polymath. Or you could have a dysfunctional upbringing or a functional upbringing and still become a polymath. And the reasons why people told me is if you don't have much financial resources, you can't outsource tasks. Like you're forced to learn in order to get what you need to get by. But on the flip side, if you have a lot of financial resources, you could take classes and get an education and travel. And with family, sometimes, you know, if you had a dysfunctional family, you want to tick it out. You want tools in your toolkit. You want to learn and become as robust a human being as you can so you can get into a better situation for yourself. On the flip side, some people said they had very functional families and they were supportive to help, you know, the child self-direct their own learning journeys. So that was probably one of the more interesting lines of my study, is that no matter your finances or your family upbringing, you could become a very multifaceted polymathic person. Also, they said that they thought their polymathy was due both to nature and nurture, but of course, being excellent at anything does require some effort and attention. In terms of career, they said that, you know, they're highly creative, that is something that they consider their superpower, and they do that across disparate disciplines. They have difficulty making career choices. We live in an age of specialization that says if you want to be successful, you have to specialize and become deep in one thing, not two or three things, just one. And so that's really hard for someone who doesn't feel like that's authentic to who they are. So they can't be happy as narrow specialists. That's very uncomfortable for them. In terms of their identity, social identity theory briefly says that people get their sense of identity because they can find a group where they fit in, or groups where they don't fit in. But mostly they can say, oh, I'm a white female with a doctorate, and so if I'm around other white females with doctorates, I can sort of fit in there. But for polymaths, their identity seemed to come about because they realized I'm not any of those things. I don't really fit in any of those groups or boxes. So I realize I'm different. And so there's social implications of that. Explaining the story of polymathy can be challenging. And they, even though they tend to be very intelligent and accomplished people, they can also experience imposter syndrome. And lastly, other characteristics is that, you know, they're voracious learners. Self-directed lifelong learning is, you know, goes hand in hand with being a polymath. And, you know, to some extent, if you have a lot of interest and capabilities, you have to be able to manage time. So that's an element of their reality as well. So with that said, that's just a brief introduction to the topic. And like I said earlier, I'm so fortunate to be here with Scott and Zorana, and I would love to just enter into a discussion now. Let me see if I can get the the screen back. Give me one. Scott and Zorana, I'm gonna ask a question and then I'm gonna open it up to you while I try to get the screen back up. Sorry. So knowing you guys come from your lenses, studying creativity, studying self-actualization, what do you think of polymaths? Like, what comes up for you, and what would you like the people watching this video to know about polymaths?
Well, I'll start. I started my career being very interested in the question of to what extent is creativity domain specific versus general. And polymaths are the end example of creativity being domain general. They are showing achievements, potential and achievement in multiple disciplines. I have studied this in different samples, starting with college student samples, very large sample of students where I asked them many, many questions of their activities and achievements, and found that for a very small group of them, um, uh, they are showing persistent achievement in multiple disciplines across arts and sciences or technology. And I have also studied it in professional adults, where again, a similar percentage of people, small but replicable percentage of people, is showing achievement in multiple domains. And I was always intrigued by these people because there were such small numbers in my studies that I couldn't really focus in examining them further. But it's always one of those notes when you write a paper of this group should be collected and studied in the longer term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Scott, what about you? What do you think of polymathic people?
It's super interesting. I love listening to both of your findings and perspectives on the matter. I come from it in a way that I really was able to map on the framework you presented, that one of the researchers put 4 different types. And I thought that was a really useful framework. I hadn't seen that framework before, honestly. And excuse me, I thought it was really useful. You find those that score high in general intelligence or IQ tend to be voracious learners across multiple domains. But that doesn't, so that's like that first level. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be creative across multiple domains. It doesn't mean that they're going to be world class in more than one domain. Expertise is a separate construct. So with the polymath construct, I see lots of the importance of distinguish between the development of expertise, the ability to learn, excuse me, and the capacity for divergent thinking. And perhaps the ultimate polymath, maybe that 4th level, he didn't call it the ultimate, but I'll call it the ultimate polymath, is the one that combines system 1 thinking and system 2 thinking, which is Seymour Epstein talked about rational versus experiential modes of thought. And he passed away, unfortunately, a couple years ago, but I was blessed to have some communications with him. And he wrote in an email to me once, he said, I think the polymath is the one who has the sensibility of the poet, but the mind of the rational scientist. And thought that was really beautiful. I actually reprinted, with his permission, before he died, that quote in one of my articles on how to be a Renaissance person. I think I called it or something. But that system 1 and system 2, being able to flexibly go back and forth, because some domains draw more in system 1 than system 2. Some domains draw more in system 2 than system 1, or I should say rational versus experiential. So if you're a scientist, you're often in rational mode. But if you're a musician, if you're a singer, dancer, poet, you're often living in the world of the experiential mode of thinking. So it just seems to me like if you're going to be a true polymath, you have to be comfortable flexibly switching back and forth between those 2 modes, or else what are you going to do? You're going to get stuck, and be like, that's too rational for me, I'm not going there, or that's too experiential, I'm not going there. It seems like really creative polymaths, maybe instead of ultimate polymaths, Zorana, maybe I should have said, I say Zorana because she's the world's expert on creativity. Maybe I should just said the creative polymath. That's what I meant to say. Not the ultimate. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. And it makes a lot of sense from the perspective of creativity theory, where the basis of creativity includes some, at least some, domain general skills and traits. And those domain general skills would include things what Scott has mentioned, general intelligence and different aspects of it, such as processing, but also it would include personality traits, openness to experience, big part of Scott's book, is the key personality factor in creativity, and creativity across domains. So people across different domains of creation have this in common. And even if we look at specific aspects of openness to experience, we are still going to see that people in different domains tend to score higher than the other general population, if you want to call it like that, on both of these aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, were you going to say something?
Love that. It was around the nose. I love that nuance. I love that. Yeah, both intellect and openness. Another way of thinking of it, maybe this is maybe too out there, but I don't think it's too out there for this group, is the Badcock argument that the creative polymath is the one who's able to be autistic and schizophrenic at the same, to have both, like me. I score very high. I score high on autistic-like traits and schizophrenia-like traits, and I've never been able to know where I fit anywhere. And I don't, because I don't feel like I fit anywhere because I don't feel like I fit anywhere. And it took a lot of my own life to fully come to understand and comprehend the weirdness that is SBK, which is that being able to have that really like hyper logical, rational, detail-oriented side of me, but also have that schizotypal side of me that's exuberant and imaginative.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I mean, I hope people listening to me right now, maybe they could resonate with that, and for the first time in their life, they can be like, they can understand themselves better. I want to empower people who might be such a weird combination of traits.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Scott. I mean, part of what I'm hoping that my research helps to do is help people feel like they're not so weird, to be a unique combination, and to really, I mean, personally, and this is not very scholarly of me to say, but I mean, I feel like if there's anything we're meant to do here, it's to express who we really are in all the facets, and not just fit into a tiny box because society says that's what we should do. And Scott, I know you're very passionate about self-actualization. And for me, I feel like how could I possibly reach my fullest potential if I don't express and discover the fullness of my humanity and my personhood? Like, it just goes hand in hand. To be open is necessary to reach your potential. And Zorana, back to what you were saying, about the importance of having multidisciplinary expertise for creativity. I mean, in the 21st century, so the innovations that were able to have taken place within disciplines have pretty much been exhausted. Like, we've gotten those innovations. Now where the big payoffs are, or when you make unique combinations at the intersection of multiple disciplines. So this is relevant for people in business, who are wanting to stay competitive. This is also just relevant for psychologists and researchers who want to understand, this natural human tendency people have. I can tell you too, whenever I talk about this, the subject really resonates with people. They say, "Oh, I'm like that too," but it doesn't get discussed enough, and we just live in the society that says, "Oh, be a specialist," and that's it. There's no other discussion after that. So I hope that, yeah, go ahead.
It may be interesting developmentally also to discuss this question and study the question. We see oftentimes in children great variety of interests, starting something, finding another interest, which follows one of the categories that you have mentioned previously. And it could be the case that many more children have the potential to be polymaths, but are directed away from it with increasing specialization and increasing specialization that starts ever earlier, um, in
Yep.
with the pressures of schooling, with sticking to something to prove one's worth, or however we want to put it. But there is a pressure on sticking with something more and then specializing. And it may be the case that more people could show polymathic achievement in life without these kinds of social pressures.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of the book Range by David Epstein?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he makes a really good argument in that book for what, like, it seems like, oh, if you start piano at age 3 and just commit to it, that would put you ahead. But he actually makes an argument for why that early start can actually put you behind. Because what happens is you don't have a sampling period to find what you're really passionate about. So you may go very, very deep into this one niche instrument or sport or whatever it is, and then really lose your energy and enthusiasm for it, and then have wasted, not wasted, but because it probably was still valuable, but have spent a lot of time on that and then have to sort of move on after it. So basically he argues that starting ahead can actually put you behind if you don't allow yourself the freedom to be open and explore your options.
Just occurred to me that I have some new data that may be of value to people relating to what you just said. My colleague Reb Rebelli and I have created a new scale called the diversity of interest scale. I don't know why it just hit me now. This is relevant to this conversation. It probably should have hit me before. It's a bit embarrassing of me. We're working on a paper on this. We have 3 studies validating the reliability and validity of the scale. But here's the twist ending of this paper. What we were interested in was this correlation with grit, because this is, I know Zoran and I share this this interest of grit and creativity. Is grit has 2 facets to it. Grit has the consistency of interest facet and the perseverance facet. And we found that the perseverance facet, in combination with our diversity of interest scale, was a better predictor of lots of goodies in life, the good life, and including creative achievement, than the pairing that of the traditional grit pairing of consistency of interest and perseverance. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. I think it's somehow relevant to what we're talking
Yeah, absolutely.
Very relevant. It's
about. Cool.
very relevant. Sorry, Angela, that I
No,
interrupt.
go ahead.
Um, it's very relevant because the concept of grit is, I think, one of concepts that is exemplifying the nature of our social reality at this time. That it is greatly valued to find something or do something and stick with it without changing your mind or changing based on circumstances. And it's very interesting, Scott, that you are finding that. And in our studies of grit, we have also found some similar things where there is no significant correlation between grit and creativity, while there is a significant prediction of persistence and passion for one's interest, where that passion is broader and more emotionally infused.
I love that you bring emotions into it, Zorana.
The experiential system is important.
There you go.
Important,
Full
right?
circle.
It's important. People ignore it. And how are you going to ignore it when you talk about creativity, right? Yeah. I love your research, Zorana.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need creativity and creative problem solving more than ever in our complex,
Yeah.
VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world with wicked problems and harsh learning environments. These topics are so relevant. So I think we're probably about reaching the time frame we have.
Could probably end on the high note we just had,
Yes.
Let's not push our luck here.
Yeah, I love it, Scott. Thanks for your playful energy you brought to this. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Oh, sorry, Zorana. I just wanted to praise Angela. That's all I wanted to do. And thank Angela for organizing this, but also for the pioneering work you've done on polymaths, which is an understudied topic within our field. You know,
Absolutely.
I think any psychologist who's joining this seminar who's like, oh, where's the full literature, or where's the whole literature on it? You know, it's like it's Angela. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I just
Thank you
wanted.
for that. Believe it or not, my dissertation, I can't believe it's the first and only doctoral dissertation on polymaths ever. I mean, there is some literature on it, but it's just shocking how little people have focused on this. And like I said, having written it and having heard from people who find it, and it's an important topic for people that deeply resonates. And so I hope more people watching this, more scholars and researchers and practitioners will get more involved in looking at this. Zorana, do you have any final thoughts?
Thank you for bringing us together. And I think your dissertation is a great source for hypotheses for future research in all of the areas that you have outlined in your introduction of both family background, career trajectories, and identities of polymaths. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, on that note, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the American Psychological Association convention in 2020.